Hello everyone, good morning again. We had a technical issue this morning. We are still practicing with technology and we didn't record the meeting this morning, so this is an attempt to simply make it up. What I said this morning was good morning, and today we are going to assemble the rover. And for assembly the rover, going back to yesterday's introduction, today we will be doing the mechanical engineering part. We will be dealing with fasteners and putting pieces together that they are solidly connected to each other. And for that, we are assembling nuts to bolts, which can be, when the bolts are as small as they are, which can be a challenge, or it can be frustrating when it doesn't work. So I will show you a little trick. When you take a screw, and most screws are right-handed screws, what does that mean? It means if the screw orientation is parallel to your thumb, then the remaining fingers of the right hand are pointing in the direction how to fasten the screw, which means you turn clockwise to fasten a screw. To put a bolt on, to put a nut on, it is a good idea to put the nut on the tip of your finger and then move it to the end of the bolt, and then turn the bolt, and you may use a screwdriver for the small screws. You turn the bolt in the wrong direction, which means turn the bolt counterclockwise. Turn it slowly and feel with your finger, which is on the nut, and there will be a click, and then you know the threads are aligned, and then you turn in the correct direction and the nut is put on correctly. That little trick will save you a lot of frustration today. Second, I want to talk about the electronic boards. You will be dealing with the electronic boards, the microbit itself and the motor bit. And electronic boards contain, this one at the front and even more in the back, very, very small components which perform their individual tasks, but small components are sensitive components. It's a little like the flowers in nature. The small parts of flowers, if you touch them, they may fall apart, so you need to be very careful with small parts. And the correct way to handle electronic boards is to grab them at the edges of the board, which protects the electronic components on the board. I also recommend not directly touching the contacts on the board or not directly touching the components on the board. With that, I turn it over to Bill to say some more about how to make complex devices like you will be doing your rover.
Good morning, STEM Seals participants. I wanted to talk to you a little bit this morning about what you will be doing today, your assembly portion of the project. You will actually be putting all the components of your rover together to make a final assembly. Just a little bit about assembly work. In every single manufacturing facility throughout the entire world, you've got different componentry that gets put into sub-assemblies, full assemblies, and final assembly. The automotive world works this way. Electronics, all of the computers that you have, someone, whether it's mechanical by robot or an actual individual, puts those components together in an assembly to make a finished product. When you're dealing with your assembly today, please, I would recommend highly that you would be working on a very clear clean work surface. If you can, put down a sheet or a towel on top of that surface and do your assembly work there. Many of the components that you will be working with today are very, very tiny, especially your screws. Some of them are size 0 millimeter, and they're 3/16 of an inch long, so they're very tiny. If you drop those onto a hard surface like a tabletop, they will bounce, and it's anyone's guess where they're going to go. So I would really recommend that you do that with a sheet or a towel and put all of your componentry as you begin to assemble onto that surface so that you can minimize the amount of lost parts. There is a small cup in your kit that contains all of the screws that you are going to need. I would highly recommend that you use that cup on that surface and actually leave those screws and components in that cup. It will help to contain things and keep from anything getting lost as we go through the assembly process. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Good morning, everybody. It is day 2, and we're real excited here at STEM Seals to have you. Of course, I'm going to touch on a couple of different things. First of all, bookkeeping notes. If I do not have your forms signed, please make sure you get those. Also, Module 1, make sure that you get that getting warmed up assessment for students. That's not for teachers, but teachers, you can mark that you have done it, or at least you've checked on your student to make sure they've done it. That might be a good way for you when you check, I'm done with that assignment, just to let me know your student has done it. Students and teachers, once you've done that, I will open Module 3. I know you maybe are not through with Module 2, but you need to do that first assessment, or it's actually the last assessment in Module 1, before I can open up Module 3, because it's that part of the research that we have to have, and we need to do that before you're exposed to too much coding and too much of our program. So I will not open Module 3 until you get that assessment done. All right, and some of you are working in Module 2 today, which is exciting. I know you didn't get all the way through with it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call in. That's about learning all about the microbit. If you have a coding problem, let us know. We can help you with that. If you call in, I'll show you how to help you navigate, and we can look at your code if you have any issues there. Bill talked about assembly. Today, that's what you're going to work on. If you get your rover assembled, you're actually going to be down into the propulsion test, where you test your rover to see how far it can move, and in a forward and reverse position. When you get ready to code for that, you're going to need something called a STEM Seals Template 2. It is not on your USB, but it is on the classroom under that lesson. So if you're not there yet, you probably won't know what I'm talking about. That's okay, you'll eventually be there. And again, remember, if you just have a question, don't hesitate calling in. So today you're going to be assembling your rover, and I'm going to give you some handy tips that I have when I assembled mine, or when I've assembled several rovers. Number one, Dr. Marsh talked about the screws and making sure how it's easier to put them in. The ones he were talking about were on the wheel assembly, and something that happened to us several times was we would lose a nut to one of those long screws, and guess where we found it? Right here on this magnetic part of the motor, on the DC motor. This is magnetic, and we've lost several nuts. I've lost some myself, and now I know that when I lose them, you think maybe they fall to the floor, but they're stuck right here on this motor. So be sure, if you lose something that's magnetic, look stuck to your DC motor and make sure that it's not hanging out there. Also, these wires that are connected here to the DC motor are very fragile, so when you're threading them through, just be very careful with the wires where they're attached to the motor. Now, Dr. Marsh in his video is going to tell you that when you hook them to this motor bit, that you need to pull on them to make sure they're connected. This part you can pull on because you're just inserting it and tightening it. But do not pull very much on this part because it is very fragile. So those are my handy tips. When you get to this is called the motor bit. It can be a little tricky, these ports, how you tighten those in there. That's all fun to learn, and things that you need to check on. Just make sure you pay attention to the video. They're in recording. And the other handy tip is, if you've not looked in your binder, even though this is online, in Module 2, Module 3, excuse me. In Module 3, you have handy pictures that show you all of the parts, so you don't have to just look at the digital copy. So make sure you pay attention to these pages and you look very closely at the screws and what they look like. It will help you with your assembly. Again, if you have any questions, let me look back at my notes and make sure, since we're re-recording this, what I told everybody this morning. Nope, I think that's it. So any questions, don't forget to call in. We're here all day. Thank you. Have a great day.